Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of our podcast here at the Cash Compound, where I interview Chris Kirkpatrick himself, one of the authors of Cashflow Hacking and Life 180. He is one of the guys who's going to help us understand not only his journey of dealing with banking, but also why he stepped away from IULs. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Mr. Chris Kirkpatrick himself. You heard him in the band back in the day, but now he's not doing so much when it comes to, singing and dancing on stage for the ladies. He's gotten a little older, a little more gray since we last saw you on MTV and VH1, my friend. But I want to introduce
Oh,
this,
that's funny.
who is soon to be a legend, a new type of legend, even though he's been in the game for longer than we have actually been doing things around here at the Cash Compound and the Banking Bros. So he is the author of Cashflow Hacking. He's got a whole system there, Life 180, and he's really helping a lot of people think differently first and then act differently when it comes to their money and opportunities to build their wealth. Mr. Chris Kirkpatrick, love to have you on the show today, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm
Yes,
excited.
sir. So tell us a little bit more about how you explain, and tell us if I did not do a great job at telling us what it is you're bringing to the table in the space that brought us
Yeah.
together, which is really helping people understand the foundational tools for wealth building and how they can hack
hmm
those tools to always work in their favor, actually guaranteed. So tell us what you're doing, man.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So, I guess the we have the same foundational values, and I think that's probably why we're talking to each other, right? I'm a big believer that most people don't have a foundational understanding of what they're trying to even accomplish with money. So if you don't know what you're trying to do, you're never going to get there successfully, right? And so Life 180, when I started Life 180 back in 2014, after leaving my role as the head of business development for a Fortune 1000 life insurance company, um, I launched Life 180 with the idea of like Life 180 is an acronym. It's living intentionally for excellence. And the 180 is all about most people are not getting the results that they want in their life. So let's turn it around. The other acronym that it stands for is leading into financial excellence, right? And so Life 180 I created with a very specific purpose and meaning, and the logo. We have a mark that has a whole story behind it, and so I'm a big believer. You hit the nail on the head. We all need to kind of start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey said, and be really intentional about where we want to go, because only if we know where we want to wind up can we actually reverse engineer a path to get there. And I remember listening to this guy. His name is Steve Lukenbach. He was actually a wholesaler for Jackson National back in the day when I was at National Life Group, and he wrote a book. And in the book, he said he came up with this idea. It was like, change your thinking, change your actions, change your life. And that was the first time I heard it, and I stole it from him. And I'm happy to give him credit about it, because I think it's so true. Because we all have this life that we want to live, and most people are not achieving the results that they want. And if you look around the world, 95% of the people in this world are not able to maintain their standard of living when they retire, or are not on track to maintain their standard of living when they retire. And so from that perspective, it's like, if it were 50%, I could say, well, there's maybe human behavior and the challenges behind human behavior come into the equation. But the bottom line is, when it's 95%, to me, that's a systemic problem. There's a foundational issue with the financial world and what people are taught about money. And so we need to come up with different strategies. And from that angle, it's like, we all have this life that we want to live, and what leads to the results that we have in life right now are our actions, and what leads to our actions is what we think, what we believe, in the books we read, the people we hang out with, the information that we consume, all these different things. And so I really, Life 180, we're a financial company. We do a lot of the same things that you do, but like what inspired the founding of Life 180 is really has nothing to do with the products that we sell or the financial tools that we use. It has to do with the information, helping people change the thinking first, because until you change the thinking that you have around money and around your life and around what's possible, then you're not going to put yourself in a position where you are forced to be more. And I think one of the things that I love about what we do is the fact that it's going to it forces you to take radical self accountability for the results in your life. And I think that's what's one of the things that's missing, and one of the reasons that most people are struggling with their money and their objectives, because they're just taking this thing, which is your results in your life and your finances, which is outside of faith and family. I can't think of anything that's more important than your money. Yet, where would you ever outsource, your marriage and making sure you have a healthy marriage? Or would you ever outsource, your relationship with God? I know I wouldn't, so why would I outsource and put the success of my money in the hands of somebody else? Right. Like, and so I'm a big believer that you are where you are in life because of who you are in life. And if you want to be more, you got to become more. And so that's, I think, utilizing your money and wrapping your financial strategy around that, and enabling and cultivating an environment that can help you become more is a huge component of you reaching it successfully,
Right.
right? And like outsourcing and thinking that you can segment your money off into some like other silo, and thinking you're going to grow in a significant way, with your family and the results in your life and just your lifestyle and all this stuff, and thinking that you're just going to segment your money off to the side and be successful with that is faulty thinking, in my perspective. And so that's what inspired me to do this and to create Life 180. And I've got a whole, obviously I could probably talk for hours about how I kind of came to this, but I worked on the corporate side of things, as a career agent, and then a manager and director of business development for the top IUL company in the country, which is pretty funny to a lot of people, because like I think at this point in time I'm probably seen as the number one anti-IUL guy in the world. And so there's a lot of reasons that that's the case. It's because of my experiences in the industry and working with clients and kind of getting to see behind the curtain in a way that most people aren't. And so I have a real passion for educating people. And yeah, so that's why I do what
Yeah.
I
So,
do.
Chris, here's the question: is in the financial world, many of our listeners, the
Yeah,
folks who know you and have seen your YouTubes as well as your other marketing, understand that
sure.
the way I was brought up to think in conventional financial training, and whether that was nature or
Yeah,
nurture, whether it was taught to us or caught by us because we saw people doing it this way, or mom and dad always had it, the Joneses, HR told me to sign up this way. We don't know what
yeah,
we're looking at, and we don't know what to trust. And I think you started to allude to that. Tell us a little bit about your journey growing up, and then kind of this career that you had
yeah,
that brought you to a place
yeah,
eventually of major success, but then a crossroads where you said, you know what, I'm going to turn the other
right.
direction. I'm going to take a 180 on this. Tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah, man. It's been an interesting journey. It's been a challenging journey in a lot of ways. And my wife and I joke about this a lot. Oftentimes I'm principled to a fault, right? Like it's cost me a lot of money over the years. And so, I grew up in Vermont. I remember growing up until I was 10 years old. I grew up in a trailer park. I remember, having a hole in the floor in the middle of the winter in my bedroom. Like I grew up with nothing. My parents, full of love, hard workers. I got my work ethic from them, but my mom worked the night shifts sorting mail at the post office. My dad was a truck driver. Like I was always alone, kind of a latchkey kid, if you will. And, you know, I just, I learned a lot of bad stuff, and, not bad, but, just like the classic, didn't have a good relationship with money, didn't understand money. My parents didn't understand or teach me anything about money. I met I ended up growing up, getting through high school,
Well, I
meeting my
need to know,
wife at a
like you
young
said,
age.
you got into a lot of bad stuff, Chris. Does that mean you put the hole in the floor in the middle of your bedroom? I want to know what this
Yeah,
was. Like, did you add this? What type of
yeah,
bad stuff were
no.
you doing when mom was working and dad was on the road?
Well, it it wasn't. It's not that I got into a lot of bad stuff at a young age, but what I will say is that if I knew then what I know now, my life would be a lot different already, because of the fact that when I was in my 20s, and I guess so, I met my wife, and when I got into the 20s, I played poker for a living for 7 years, and which is interesting because like I'm like this financial
Right,
security
right.
guy,
That's
and
it.
I'm a
Yeah.
so I played poker for a living. And so if there's a huge incongruency to a lot of people, I always tell people, like, listen, you're never going to get anywhere in life without taking risk. Like you have to take risk. You're not going to get wealthy just saving money in a whole life policy. and not getting any velocity behind that money, getting that money to work for you and taking some risk. The big difference is you should never take risk inside of the insurance policy. You want to take risk outside of it, invest in things invest in yourself, like all these things I'm sure we'll get into. But like back then, and by the way, I have a way higher risk tolerance than 99.999% of the people in the world. Like I take on probably too much risk, but guess what? I've structured my life in a way that I can do that. You know what I mean? Like uh, back in my 20s, I made a ton of money and I blew a ton of money. And I know a lot of people say that, but I was traveling the world playing poker, sponsored by professional poker online poker sites. Just I was ranked number 64 in the world playing online poker for a 3-year period, and it was a fun time. But it's like if I went back, I ended up losing a lot of money because of the way I had everything set up, the way I spent money. It was obviously cash, everything. It just was. It was what it was. The government shut down online poker, and I remember when it happened. And I had been looking into it anyway because my father-in-law had been a broker, advisor, money manager with Wells Fargo Advisors that had previously been like Wachovia, AG Edwards. He kind of went through that transition with as those companies got acquired. And so when 2009 happened and I was starting to look into it, I wanted to go get a job with my father-in-law because I knew I loved money. I've always been really passionate about the economy. And so when I went to get a job with him, his manager, Ray, was just like, Chris, listen, I think you're going to kill this industry and just crush it. But we're just coming out of the Great Recession here. And if I hire you with no experience being a poker player for the last 7 years, they're going to fire me. Like I can't do it. So what I need you to do is go get a job at an insurance company and prove yourself for a year. And once you have proof and a track record, then I can hire you. So I got into the insurance industry, man, as what was supposed to be just a stepping stone to be the succession plan for my father-in-law. And I would have had a baked in couple $100,000 a year income, and it would have been, and I would have taken over, and it would have grown from there, and it would have been really, honestly, pretty cush, The first 6 months, I started working. I ended up going through the Circle of Wealth program. I don't know if you're familiar with like Don Blanton, the Circle of Wealth, and all that. So I went through the Master Mentor program with Don, and it just when I learned all the stuff that I learned, I didn't know what I didn't know, kind of thing, right? And it's a benefit. It's like a blessing and a curse at the same time, right? Because I'm always willing to pivot and admit when I'm wrong, and you pivot if necessary. And so then immediately I was like, wow. I joined this as a stepping stone, but I could never go join my father-in-law knowing what I know now. Like I can't go just sell mutual funds and stocks and manage money with a money management fee and all that stuff because it's totally incongruent with what I
So,
believe.
Chris, at this point, you're at your first. We're like at our 90-degree angle, not our 180. So, how did
Exactly.
Thanksgiving dinner go down when you had to tell your father-in-law, "Look, I ain't coming over"?
Bro, my wife, it's the funniest thing. Like, if Thanksgiving dinners to this day are always really interesting. So I just as a side note, so I remember like jumping ahead a little bit, but just because it's in alignment with this question, about 3 years ago, mind you, at 3 years ago, I've had my YouTube channel for a while. I've been doing this for a while. I've been in the industry for 8 years. I've had a lot of success, whatever. My father-in-law has always love him. He's like the nicest guy, most high integrity guy. But he's been in the industry so long, it's like you can't open your mind up to maybe something new because it would turn everything he's been running his business on its head, and he's just not at the stage where he can take that risk, right? So he just kind of closed his mind off to it. But I remember at Christmas, he comes up to me and he's like, Chris, and he calls a family meeting, and we sit down at Christmas.
Uh-oh.
And everybody's there. My wife, my brother-in-law's there, my sister-in-law's there, like everybody's sitting down, my mother-in-law, everybody's there. And he's like, we gotta have a conversation about my legacy. I'm like, all right. So we sit down and he's like, so I want to create a family banking system. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. I'm listening.
Right. You knew not to talk. You knew not to talk yet, right?
Yeah. I'm just sitting back. I'm like, I'm listening, and he's like, so I found this thing. It's what the Rockefellers have been doing, and it's what the like all the. And I'm like, all right, I'm listening. I'm still just sitting back because I just
you're looking at everybody else in the room without looking at everybody else in the room.
And so finally he's just like, I want to do this thing, and I'm looking into how I can pull this off. I've researched enough to know that there are these successful families that are doing things and managing their family finances in a certain way, but I don't know enough to know exactly what I need to do yet. But I want you guys to know that I'm really thinking about this financial thing, right? Like in my legacy and estate and all this stuff. And I just sat back because, first of all, I mean, I've got tons of content on this. And so my first thought was like, okay, you haven't done a lot of research, because there's zero chance you're doing a lot of deep research on this without coming across my content. Like not to be like boastful or anything, but like, father-in-law, like, I'm sorry, like you didn't do a deep dive. Like, and so, and I just kind of had to sit back, and finally my wife just kind of, she couldn't help herself. She just goes, Dad, like, like, this is what Chris was trying to tell you about 5 years ago.
Right.
And so it was like really funny, man. But Jesus could never be a prophet in
That's
his own
right.
town,
That's
right? And
right.
so it's
You can't. No,
what
nothing
it is.
good comes out of Nazareth now. So you got to just wait it out, right?
I know. And so it's kind of crazy, but like it's been a journey. I started off being like hardcore ride or die IUL all the way. As I grew with National Life, became rookie of the year nationally as a rookie agent, and then got promoted to be a manager, regional manager, director of business development for the company. As I kind of climbed through, I got access to more behind the scenes stuff. The more I was like, man, this isn't what I thought it would be. And it just got to the point where I realized that the message that is being utilized to sell it is deceptive. At just lack of transparency on how it really works, and the policies weren't performing. As I was having these annual reviews with my clients, and it was just kind of one of those things where it was like, this isn't what I thought it was. And then it was actually a conversation with Don Blanton at Circle of Wealth that he was just like, you need to look in. He gave me some things to kind of check into, some people to talk to, and I did a deep dive, and I committed myself to, like, either buying into it and really understanding what I was doing, and continuing on the path of selling IUL, which, by the way, would have been the easiest process because I had been offered a lot of money to stay, promotions. It would have been simple. The problem is what I learned when I had conversations with the actuaries that were designing the products and the executives that were doing it all. I just learned it's not all it's cracked up to be, and it's not how they're selling it. And they focus on the nice, sexy, fun selling points of it, and they omit all the other stuff. But it's all the other stuff that really matters ultimately. And when I learned that, I had to pull a 180. That's the 180 to get to your question. Is like I couldn't do it, and so I just said, okay. I realized um, really the whole life insurance, properly designed whole life policy with a participating mutually held company is really everything, is the sexy side of IUL. Like at the end of the day, when you look at it, and I realized that, and so I went ride or die whole life, and I've set, I focus on that. And I focus on real estate investing and what I call cash flow hacking, which is kind of like where they intersect, where properly designed whole life policy meets real estate investing is an amplifier to it. And that's my focus. But I feel like there's not a lot of people in the world that understand index universal life to the level that I do, and have had the luxury of having access to the people that I have. And so with as much misinformation as there is out there in the policies, and with the way it's being sold and misrepresented on TikTok and YouTube and all the social media platforms, I kind of feel a responsibility to kind of like fall on the stake, if you will, sometimes, because I put myself out there, and it's honestly, it's a war pole in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of times I'm just fighting a fight that I know I can't win. And there's really nothing in it for me in a lot of cases. It's except for just
Right.
arguments
Right.
and strife and whatever. But I was the kid in high school that, like, if somebody was bullying somebody, I stood up for the kid that was getting bullied.
Yeah.
Like that's just my personality. And I look at all the misinformation about IULs out there as people bullying people about their money, even though I know it's not that. And I know people, for the most part, have good intentions when they're trying to sell this product. They just don't know what they don't know. They're not educated about it. And so I'm focusing on educating, and I'm willing to take 100 pieces of negative feedback from people and arguments if I know it can help one person that's open minded to really learn. So That's why I do what I
Well,
do,
we
man.
appreciate it, man. You talk a lot about, and I can tell that you've got this integrity, this personal standard that you adhere to, and especially in what's the life
Yep.
insurance world out there. I realize that that standard
Yeah.
is not what the average agent has personally, and what a lot of folks who can make money from agents selling a product like IUL or other products, they don't require that high of a standard of integrity. So that's very interesting. And the reason behind that is, and this is where my kind of question comes in, is what is it about IULs, briefly, that aren't what they seem to be in the marketing out there? So I learned what Nelson Nash realized, right? What can be done in whole life can be done and has been able to be been done for 200 years in North America. But he coined it
Hmm.
and realized something after he had paid in for 20 plus years. And he said, hold on, let me really look at what's possible here. And he named that the infinite banking concept. Now, when I see infinite
So,
banking on TikTok, on YouTube, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what Nelson said. Here or there, or
yeah.
here or there. And one of those things is because the product he said you have to use would be participating whole life from a mutual company. But I'm
Hmm.
seeing a lot of out there about
Hmm.
IUL, my friend. What is it that apparently is not working? Right. What is it that people think is working that's not working? Because I'm told by everybody on the airwaves or on YouTube or on TikTok, no, 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 it works the same way. You can do this with that as well. What's going on?
Yeah, so it reminds me of a conversation I had about 2 months ago where I went to this conference and it was I won't name where it was, but like so I went to this conference and we had to go around. It was like a small kind of mastermindy kind of conference, and there was like 20 people in the room, and nobody knew anybody for the most part going in. And all of a sudden, everybody had to give a 60-second ish, 30 to 60 second on who you are, what you do. And all of a sudden, this other guy at the one of the last guys to speak goes, "I do privatized banking, infinite banking," and I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome! Like another guy, like this is so cool." I didn't know
Yeah.
who he was. And so, we do the seminar, and after everything's over, I go up to him. I'm like, "Dude, it's so cool that you do infinite banking." I'm like, "That's what I do too." He goes, "Yeah, I know who you are." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. Like, so you've seen the channel? I'm like, you've seen the channel and stuff?" And he's like, "Yeah, I haven't. Honestly, I'm not a fan." I'm like, "Oh."
Mm.
I'm like, "All right, that's fair. That's fair. Like, so you sell IUL, right?" So that was my response. "So you sell IUL?" And he goes, "Yeah, I do." And I go, "So you don't do infinite banking?" He goes, "No, I do."
Oh, oh,
I said,
right.
"Well,
Oh,
you don't sell IUL if you do infinite banking." And he goes, "You're right." I mean, so now it becomes a little bit of a
yes.
battle, right? Like, and so I'm like, "So you don't do infinite banking?" He's like, "I do." And he goes, he goes, "But the bottom line is you guys just don't understand infinite banking." I go, "That's really funny you say that." When the guy who actually created infinite banking would roll over in his grave if he heard that you were doing infinite banking with IUL. Like, so you can tell me I don't understand it, but it's actually you that doesn't understand it. And so, we agreed to disagree at the end
Well,
of
I
the
was
day.
wondering, like, did you like
But
fight this
but
dude at the seminar? Do like I heard that you and I
yeah,
might be attending an in-person conference together next week for the first time. Like, are we gonna like have to fight
yeah,
in a mastermind circle? Because I'm gonna have to bring some
yeah. I mean,
backup or something.
I know. Like at the end of the day, like I took a step back, which, but, whatever. Like I didn't want to make the guy look bad. I'm not. It's funny because a lot of people think I'm like this super confrontational dude because I make a lot of very polarizing, opinionated videos about IUL versus whole life, and I'll stand by those all day long. But I'm not going to get into a fight with a dude at a conference. And he wanted to go there. I mean, he really did. Like, but I was just like, all right. And then what was funny is the next day he started trolling my videos and making all these comments and telling me that I was weak and I backed down and this and I'm like, oh man, like you just like he showed me his integrity, right? Like the way and like his character and all that stuff. So it was what it was. So I just kind of moved on, and those are the situations you just want to walk past. But the bottom line is, to answer your question, index universal life. Well, I'm going to ask. I'm going to put it back on you a little bit, right? Like so. When we talk about infinite banking, what are the reasons that people want to do infinite banking? Like, what is the purpose, the attraction of utilizing infinite banking
Well, I would
for?
say maybe two things when the average person who's kind of starting from zero starts to understand what's possible. In whole life insurance, there are
Yeah.
guarantees, and those guarantees are growth of your cash over the course of your whole
Yeah.
life. So you'll be able to utilize more and more money throughout that time. And the second part is akin to the first part. You'll be able to utilize it. There will actually be cash flow. So throughout your life,
Totally.
you'll have an ever increasing pool of money to actually spend, to actually finance things throughout your life. So you're not going to
Yep.
worry about volatility. You'll have the control to use it. You'll have cash flow. It'll always be increasing. So that's what I think the average person thinks they're latching onto. Probably an IUL as well,
Yep.
because it sounds a lot like that. And you might be saying, hey, no, 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 it's not the same thing. And that's what I'm learning as well. So that's what I would say the two things
Yeah.
are is guarantees, and that guarantees are growth and cash
Yep.
flow.
Perfect. So, uh, 100% accurate on those, and I break it down. Um, I break it down, I think, even earlier than that. And I just try to figure out, like, I always tell agents that I coach, I say, you need to stop thinking like a life insurance agent and start thinking like an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs' jobs, first and foremost, is to solve problems for people, period. And you can't go in thinking, even as much as I love whole life insurance and infinite banking and properly designed insurance policies, when how they fit into people's lives, but I love them because of the problems that I know they can solve for people, and those problems are different for everybody. If you're a real estate investor, it's a different problem. If you want to invest in crypto, it's a different thing. If you just talking about financial structure in your financial life, I do this thing called the Life 180 pyramid talk, where it's like, people's problems is not their investments and not getting enough returns and stuff. It's your financial structure and the way that you've set up your financial life to be able to weather storms and be able to operate and act like a good investor and have good investor behavior. Most people, it's our behavior as humans with our money that leads to negative problems. So what I would say is the number one thing is control, right? Setting up our financial structure in our life so we can have a financial system and almost have our financial system be a filter that we run every one of our financial decisions
I
through,
like that.
right? That's the way that's the way I look at this, right? And so from that perspective, that's way deeper than, hey, I'm just going to have a policy that I can get positive arbitrage in, right? Like, the biggest mistake that I see IUL agents that think they can utilize infinite banking for with IUL is they think, oh, well, it's really all just about, like, how do I save up in a policy and then be able to borrow against that and create baked in positive arbitrage. First of all, you can't do that with IUL no matter what, because it's either a wash loan or you have an index loan, which positive arbitrage is possible, but also negative arbitrage is possible. And they negate the fact, they like to focus on the fact that, that positive arbitrage is possible, but then they talk about it like that's the absolute thing that's going to happen. And the problem with that is that these insurance companies allow it to happen on the illustration because they bake in 50 basis points of positive arbitrage in the illustration. But that's a thing that regulators are looking at now. And I just had a great conversation with Bobby Samuelson. And in that conversation, he's talking about regulation AG 49B that's coming out that's going to change the ability for that. And so the bottom line is, a lot of the reasons that these IUL agents think that they can sell infinite banking, the concept, or implement infinite banking with IUL, they're able to illustrate it being done in a positive fashion on the illustration because of the way regulators allow illustrations to be made. The problem is a lot of class action lawsuits have been happening because of it. Regulators, companies are having a lot of problems, and with that, regulatory updates are happening. That's where regulation. Bobby Samuelson calls it AG 49B. They may call it something else, but the bottom line is, if you go back and let's do a quick little history lesson, IULs were started in 1997, but they didn't really have any market share until 2009 because the story became very compelling after the Great Recession, right? 2009 to 2015 was the wild, wild west. There was all sorts of, like, illicit tactics happening, even worse than they are now. They came out with regulation AG 49 that allowed negative things to happen. A lot of negative things that were happening got kind of reined in, but it opened the door for companies had to kind of adapt, and they created other multipliers and other effects to be able to allow illustrative rates because they weren't allowed to illustrate such high returns. So the products didn't look as sexy. So they had to create these other functions like multipliers to counter regulation AG 49. And those, they ended up having a lot of class action lawsuits over all of that. So they realize, okay, these multipliers, they don't perform the way that we said they would, all this stuff. So in 2020, they created Regulation AG 49A to counter all that. But then in response, because once again, they wouldn't illustrate the same way, these companies came up with no cap indexes. They came up with proprietary indexes and manipulated it all. And so now, once again, regulators are being like, holy cow, how do we get ahead of this? And so there's going to be regulatory changes coming in the next 12 to 24 months, I think, where a lot of the reasons that a lot of the ways IUL agents are selling their products are going to, those loopholes, so to speak, are going to get closed up on them. And so they're going to realize that infinite banking cannot be done with IUL, whether they like it or not. Regulators are going to show them, because there's just been too many class action lawsuits.
Right. So my question for you is, what is it that you can do with an IUL? Where is the place for IUL? If you're saying that there's not room for it in the infinite banking concept, as foundationalized by Nelson Nash, like, where does it fit, or what does it do if it's not actually doing the things that we're all hearing on our marketing on
Yeah.
our screens? Then what does it do? What's it good for? And what do we expect these policies that we, not you and I, but we have out there, what do we expect them to do and be performing at over the course of our lifetimes here?
Well, so it's really interesting. I've been doing a lot of analysis of full illustration breakdowns. So, like, MPI is a big one on TikTok, right? And so I did a full illustrative breakdown on the Mutual of Omaha MBI plan, and in there, speaking to this, and this is answering your question. In that Mutual of Omaha illustration, it says, when we talk about upside potential and downside protection inside of an IUL, it's not upside potential because of the market participation, right? As people say with options, it's upside potential compared to a traditional universal life policy. So really, the only place IUL has is people that are wanting permanent insurance. If you design it properly and you want a permanent insurance where you can spread it out, if you fund it properly and all this stuff, it's going to have a little upside potential compared to a traditional universal life policy. You're never going to be able to outperform the general fund inside of an IUL policy over the long run. You're going to have years where it's better, years, where it can outperform it. But over the long run, can't draw blood from a rock. And, your options budget and the hedging costs and all these things that go into IULs, way more complicated than most people realize. But to answer your question, it's the place where IUL can work is utilizing it as just permanent death benefit when it's funded properly. When you start borrowing against it, and the number one way it's sold is tax-free alternative income strategies, right? Like the and that's the way, honestly, that it creates more problems. And if you read the illustrations, it tells you you're running a massive risk of lapsing the policy by taking loans against it. And it says it straight up in almost every illustration that you're going to see. My belief is, and this is what made me come to the conclusion, I should say, that whole life is it for me and not IUL, is because when you really look at the moving parts inside of an IUL and then you compare it to a whole life, and if your expectations with what IULs will really perform at, you come to the conclusion that whole life is the way to go, and because it's going to get you the permanent insurance as well. Will IUL, by the way, have a little upside potential compared to whole life? Absolutely. If you design it properly, if you structure it properly, it's got about, from the calculations that I've done with some like actuaries and real professionals, it's got about 50 basis points of upside potential compared to a whole life
Over the
policy.
long haul, is what you're saying.
But over the
Yeah.
long haul. But from my perspective, I always make my decisions. I run my decisions through a filter. What's the upside? What's the downside? Can I live with the downside? And like when you look at the upside, 50 basis points of upside, and then you look at the downside and you go, I could lose everything. I'm just going to go with whole life and keep my
Right.
life simple. And I'll take risk outside of the,
Right.
you know what I
Right.
mean? That's why I do what I
Yeah,
do.
so a lot of folks, you mentioned take risk outside of the policy, and you and your team are expanding the knowledge of folks with cash flow hacking, for instance. I just got my copy, ladies and gentlemen, so we'll
Awesome, bro.
link to it so you guys can get it maybe straight from Chris, because maybe not
Awesome.
even on
Yep.
Amazon or wherever. But the question is now is, okay, so these products are not or should not be seen as investments. What is cash flow hacking all about? What can we do now that we've got an ever increasing, the people who listen to us or want to listen to us are looking at an ever increasing cash flow of dollars? What are we going to do with that? Tell us what cash flow
Yeah.
hacking is all about.
Yeah. So cash flow hacking is I'm a big believer. First of all, I'm a big believer in real estate. I think, some of the wealthiest people, most of the wealthiest people in the world have at least some exposure to real estate. I think the more millionaires are created through real estate than any other financial avenue in the world. And so I had a mentor tell me when I first started in my kind of professional career, he said, Chris, if you want to be successful, you got to find people that have the life that you want to live and emulate what they do until you get where you want to be. And success means different things to everybody in this world. We could line up 100 people in a line, and I could ask, what does a successful life look like to them? And I'll probably get 80 different variations of an answer, right? And so success is a very personalized thing, and it's not just on a spreadsheet financially, right? Like we got to look at it from a much more macro level. And so um, cash flow hacking is simply saying, okay, I'm a big believer in real estate, but I'm also a big believer that people are struggling with their money because of the fact that they're taking too much risk too soon. And cash flow hacking is ultimately a process in which we go through to reach financial freedom. I'm a big believer that the biggest lie, and this is I think across the board, the biggest lie being told in the financial industry is the younger you are, the more risk you can take. Now, maybe it's not a lie and maybe I'm a little bold about that statement because sure, we can take more risk when we're 25 because if we lose it, we got more time to make up for that risk versus if we lose everything at 65, obviously we're kind of up the creek without a paddle. So from that perspective, it's true. But you and I understand that, compounding is important. Consistent contributions are important. And that if you avoid losses, there's a lot more value in avoiding losses than there is in chasing big returns, right? And so if you want to really implement compounding and, I know how passionate you are about that. You name your podcast at, right? Like, so if you want to implement that, you got to have consistent contributions and you got to have no losses just very simplistically put, you can't have losses and you got to be consistent with the contributions. The younger you are, the less risk you have to
Mm,
take if you do
mm,
that. And the other piece of advice that was given to me, because I have a propensity to take a lot of risk on. That is like a weakness of mine. Is like I take risk, man. Like, and to the point where my wife gets uncomfortable sometimes, right? And so, that's my nature. Is I'm a risk taker. One of the other pieces of advice that I got was, Chris, sometimes you have to slow down to go fast.
mm.
And if you slow down, you're going to put yourself in a position to be able to take advantage of more opportunity when you're more prepared. And so I equate the slow down to move fast in the financial spaces. You need to save before you invest, and you need to save with the purpose of
Yes.
investing. Okay, so that's a first decision to make is like, I know I need to save before I go invest so I can actually act like a good investor, have good investor behavior. Now the next question is, where do I save my money? If I know I need safe, liquid, accessible, guaranteed capital that I want access to invest in real estate, to invest in my businesses, to invest in myself and masterminds and groups and like my network and all that stuff. If that's what I want to do, and I know that's where I'm going to get the best results to become more so I can give more and accomplish more and give more back and create more, like if that's where I put my value, well, where's the best place to keep that money? And when I look at all the options, there's no better place than a properly designed whole life insurance policy. And so that's what I look at is like, I'm going to keep my money inside of a whole policy. And then cash flow hacking is the function of that whole life policy. I'm going to borrow against it to leverage and start my real estate portfolio. And then I'm going to use the cash flow from that real estate, put it back, and I'm going to create this cycle. And that's ultimately what I talk about in cash flow hacking is the process. It's a 9-step process to reach financial freedom. It doesn't take people 45 years. I talked to somebody earlier today. I also call it the retirement rescue plan because if you're 50 years old, 55 years old, and you maybe got 150 grand saved, and you're feeling like you're way behind in your planning and you're not going to get where you want to go, you can actually utilize whole life and real estate, and you combine the two together, you could be completely financially free in the next 10 years and get where you want to go still. So there is still
See, it's
hope.
so much more than just about money or being rich. It's the wealth that comes along with that, like you said, is just more expansive. And I knew you and your buddy Caleb, who's my buddy as well, talk about that. We're trying to live in purpose. We're trying to be people who can contribute here, there, and everywhere. How much do I want to participate with and give and love and be involved with? It's so much more than just money. It's so interesting that I have to tell people sometimes, and sometimes just bringing it down to this baseline. You know what? Whole life insurance from mutual companies where there's a mutual benefit, it's only for good people. It's only for family people.
Yeah.
It's only for people who think about their health. And of course, I'm not throwing people under the bus who don't have all these, spokes taken care of at that particular time. But you see, like from what you said, what we're doing is actually for people who want to contribute. There's so many people who say things like, on a base level, you've been in the insurance game for longer than I've been looking at it at all. You started when I was, your first day on the job here. I'm 5 minutes out of school probably, but what I'm looking at here, sometimes when people say things like, you know what, I don't know if I need insurance. I don't have anybody I want to give the money to. And I said, that is such a minimalistic, lacking spot to be in life. Not about insurance. It's like I say always jokingly, well, I mean, you can put my name on the beneficiary line if you like. I mean, because I'll take it. But I mean, you're telling me easy, everyone understands. So there may not be someone significant in your life, in your house, you're responsible for right now, because they may not have kids or a spouse or something like that. But I'm telling you, like, you don't know, nobody at church needs that money. Nothing, nothing like, yeah.
I always tell, and I coach agents to this all the time. Never sell life insurance based on need, because nobody needs it. I don't need it. I got a wife and 3 kids. I don't need life insurance. Now I could tell you why I personally want it. I don't need it. You know who needs it?
Someone
My
else.
wife,
Yeah,
my 3
someone
kids.
else needs what you buy. What you buy is some sort of benefit when you're gone for someone else. I always tell people all the time, the only bad news here is you will die one day, but we can talk about good things for the rest of our conversation. You will die one day. Let's make sure that's taken care of, because there's a lot of GoFundMes in my community, and a lot of people needed to have it, or else we're doing a fish fry at church. You know what I'm saying? So what we're trying to avoid is the lack, but there's so much more than that. When we get past the lack, when we get past the fact that, you don't love somebody enough in the world, or somebody doesn't love you enough to want to do that, there's so much more after that. That's only one sentence compared to everything we're going to discuss. So.
I always tell people, a properly designed whole life insurance policy, and I mean this, and you can steal
All right, I'm
this.
ready.
And I promise you, there's no other financial product that will do this for you, but a properly designed whole life insurance product is the only financial product in the world that will make sure what you want to happen will happen when you want it to happen, whether you're here to see it or not. Period. And when you look at that, I always kind of look at, like, kind of continuing what you were just saying, is if you don't want whole life insurance, what it tells me is you're a bit of a narcissist. And I know that's a bold statement, but it tells me that you haven't taken the time to be intentional enough. Remember, living intentionally for excellence. You haven't been intentional enough about thinking and praying and spending time alone, thinking about what you care about, what you want your purpose on this earth to be, because we all have one, right? Like, so you don't have to be married and have kids like me or like you, right? Like maybe you're single, maybe it is your church, maybe it's a local community organization, maybe it's, it doesn't matter, but we all have the ability to leave a really significant stamp on this earth, and whatever you want that to look like for you. And maybe you don't need it, but when you really break it down into its simplest parts, all a properly designed whole life insurance policy is, even if you don't need it, is it's a savings account on steroids. Like, and so if I show you how you could have your money, have your cake and eat it too, have your money working for you, and when it comes down to it, you're going to be able to leave more behind and create more value and inject more value into the world in a specific place, way, shape, form, manner that you would be proud to contribute to, and whatever you want that to look like for you. If that is not an appealing thing for you, honestly, like, I probably got other people I want to talk to anyway.
There it is.
You know what
right.
I mean? Like,
yeah. I'm only looking to chat with people who are looking to better themselves and others because they were here. So if that is not you, that's
Totally.
not where. And of course, there are many people who have been involved in our broader industry that you and I spend a lot of time in that have
Yep.
made it tough for us to be able to have that conversation as a man of integrity right off the bat, because they're coming with a
Yep.
wall up. They're coming with defenses. And of course, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that way. We're going to be here a long time. I know you are, Chris. We're going to have to fight all off these demons of these people. We're going to have lapsing policies for the next 50 years. But we're
And
going to be here for it, right? We're going to be here for it, you and I. So tell our listeners what's going on with you next. I heard you guys got big things in the works coming out at your company, and you're expanding right now. And tell us where we can find you when we want to see your stuff.
totally, yeah. So we're doing a lot of crazy things, man. My journey in this industry it's been crazy, and just amazing and fun. And I've been blessed to have a lot of really just amazing people come into my life recently. We've launched an IMO. We're doing a lot of cool things. Building marketing and training and systems around supporting agents. I call them IUL refugees, people that were at WFG and PHP and places like that are like, oh my gosh, like I got into this because I wanted to help people. And I realize now that that's not what's really happening. So, creating a space, a safe place for people to actually learn, because as you can probably tell by all my content, I'm super passionate about education and making sure you are a professional and understand this stuff inside out before you go pitch to people. So, we're growing actively. It's not for everybody, full transparency, but for the right people that align with the vision and the integrity and the mission and the purpose and everything, we're actively expanding. If there are any agents out there interested, but there's that we're looking at. I can't get into the details, but we're looking at some really interesting real estate opportunities right now, which we'll maybe next time we do a podcast or whatever, we'll have more details we can get into. But I just got back from an international trip, looking at some really cool opportunities that I'm excited about. Honestly, it's just expanding the mission and collaborating with people like you and working with Caleb and anybody. Like, I'm an open book. I'm here to serve. I have nothing but an abundance mindset. Like, you and I, we work for different companies, right? Like, I guess like different IMOs. I have my own IMO. You work with a different one. I'm happy to do this with you every day because like you're reaching people, we're reaching people. Like, I'd rather the pie get bigger and have a small piece of the pie and we can work together. What we do and the mission we have and the people we're trying to serve and how we're trying to help people. We need more people like you, like me, like Caleb, like Chris Noggle, the people that are out there, really educating people in the way that needs to be done so people can simplify their financial confusion, regain control of their financial life. Like, we need more of that. And so to me, that whatever that looks like, whatever it takes, we need to all band together. The people that are doing it right, we need to lock arms, because unfortunately, there's far more people doing this from an uneducated perspective. And that's what my channel is about. You go search Life 180 on YouTube, you'll find me there. Real Chris Kirkpatrick on Instagram and TikTok. You find me there. And that's what all the content that I do is just about helping kind of pull back the veil, hopefully, and educating people about, what you can do to gain control of your life, maybe understanding a lot of the product stuff. I guess I get a lot more product detailed than most people because like of my IUL background in space. And I think there's such a need for that. So that's kind of a unique perspective, but I love serving people. I love what we do. And, I come from a place of, if there's ever anything I can do to help anybody, in this industry, if I believe that you want to do it the right way, and that if I believe that you're out there fighting the good fight, as I like to say, like I will do anything I can to help anybody, even if there's nothing in it for me, because I believe the world needs more.
Love it. Well, we appreciate you being on our channel today. And the way you just pitched yourself, ladies and gentlemen, this is an angel here on earth. We'll see if he's really that good. We'll see if he's really that good in the long run. But I think he's going to be here to stay, because what he is preaching on his channels and in his book that I'm just now diving into is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. So if you utilize it well in your mind first, think about those right things, get those actions in place, then you'll change your life with the products and processes you put in. So, Chris, we appreciate you being here with us at the Cash Compound and the Banking Bros today. Look forward to seeing you in person very soon, my friend, and we'll get to more of these in the future.
Sweet.